Ask a historian when Rome fell, and you'll start a fight. Beat some will say 476 AD. Others will argue for dates centuries earlier, pause, or even 1,000 years later. And here's the thing. They're all right. We often point to 476 AD, a date ingrained in our minds as the final fall of Rome. But what about 301 AD, marked by economic turmoil, or 529 AD, a time of cultural stagnation? Let's explore these three death dates and uncover which one truly marks the end of Rome. So let's talk about three dates that actually matter. Not the ones you learned in school, beat, but the ones that show us what collapse really means. In 301 AD, the Roman economy faced a catastrophic collapse that would set the stage for its slow decline. This was the year when Emperor Diocletian issued the edict on maximum prices, attempting to control rampant inflation and stabilize the economy. Prices soared, and the empire struggled to maintain its infrastructure. Fast forward to 410 AD, when the Visigoths, led by King Alaric, famously sacked Rome. This marked the first time in 800 years that Rome had fallen to a foreign enemy. The events of that day sent shockwaves through the Roman world, signaling the end of Roman military dominance in the West. The once invincible city was now vulnerable. Now, let's jump ahead to 529 AD, when Emperor Justinian sought to reclaim the glory of Rome through cultural revival and legal reform. This year saw the closure of the Platonic Academy in Athens, often regarded as a symbolic end to classical education and thought. What does this tell us about the cultural fabric of Rome? These three dates each represent a different facet of Rome's decline: economic, military, and cultural. But which date truly signifies the end of this once great empire? In this video, we'll dissect the implications of each of these pivotal moments. We'll peel back the layers of history, examining the economic collapse of 301 AD, the military defeat of 410 AD, and the cultural demise of 529 AD. Each date paints a unique picture of Rome's gradual decline, and ultimately, we'll explore which of these events encapsulates the true end of the Roman Empire. So, stay with me as we navigate through the complexities of Rome's demise. Let's dive into our first date, 301 AD. At its peak, Rome's economy moved grain from Egypt to feed 1 million people in the capital, minted coins that were trusted from Britain to Mesopotamia, and maintained roads that made Amazon's logistics look primitive. But by the 3rd century, cracks were beginning to show. The empire was grappling with hyperinflation and a currency crisis. The silver denarius, once a stable currency, had been debased to the point that it lost much of its original value. In response to the economic turmoil, Emperor Diocletian enacted the Edict on Maximum Prices in an attempt to control rampant inflation. This edict set maximum prices for over 1,000 goods and services, ranging from grain to labor. Diocletian's intent was clear: to stabilize the economy and curb inflation. However, the edict failed spectacularly. Merchants and producers found ways to circumvent the price controls, leading to shortages and a black market. People hoarded goods, and the economy continued to spiral downward. The economic collapse in 301 AD had severe repercussions for the Roman Empire. The reliance on slave labor became increasingly problematic as the economy struggled to support large estates. As the rural population dwindled due to plagues and warfare, agricultural output fell, leading to food shortages. The once vast and fertile lands of North Africa, which had been the breadbasket of the empire, began to falter. When that economic machine broke down, the effects rippled outward. Soldiers went unpaid and switched sides. Cities couldn't afford defenses. The whole social contract started to fray. As the economy faltered, social structures began to break down. People lost faith in the stability of the empire. The government became increasingly authoritarian as it sought to control the chaos. This marks the beginning of a transition that would lead to the eventual fragmentation of the empire. In the decades following 301 AD, the empire faced several external threats and internal strife. The crisis of the 3rd century saw multiple emperors rise and fall, often at the hands of their own military. By 260 AD, the empire had nearly split into 3 separate states, each struggling for survival. This was a period of immense instability, with civil wars and invasions exacerbating the economic challenges. Here's where it gets interesting. The events of 301 AD were pivotal in the sense that they set into motion a series of crises that would culminate in the eventual decline of the Roman Empire. Social unrest, economic hardship, and administrative failure all contributed to a society increasingly disoriented and disconnected from the once glorious past. But as we know, the decline wasn't a single event. It was a process. And by 410 AD, the Roman Empire would face another critical juncture that would exacerbate these existing issues. The year 410 AD marks a watershed moment in Roman history. This was the year when the Visigoths, led by their king Alaric, sacked Rome. It was a shocking event, as Rome had stood as the heart of the empire for over a millennium. The sacking of Rome was not just a military defeat. It was a psychological blow to the Roman identity. The siege began in early 410 AD, when Alaric and his forces surrounded the city. The Romans, despite their long history of military prowess, were unprepared for this kind of assault. Alaric had previously demanded a substantial ransom for the city, but the Roman authorities failed to heed the threat. The city walls were breached, and for 3 days, the Visigoths pillaged the city. The sacking of Rome sent shockwaves throughout the empire. This was the first time in 800 years that Rome had fallen to a foreign enemy. For the first time in 800 years, a foreign army was inside the walls of Rome. Beat people across the Mediterranean heard the news and thought the world was ending, literally. St. Jerome, writing from Bethlehem, said his voice failed him when he tried to describe it. Rome, which had once been the embodiment of power and civilization, was now vulnerable. The idea of an invulnerable empire crumbled. Alaric's actions were not merely the result of a desire for loot. The Visigoths had faced severe challenges of their own, including displacement due to the Huns' expansion. They sought refuge within the Roman borders, but were met with hostility. Alaric's campaign was partly a response to the mistreatment of his people. He intended to secure a place for his tribe within the Roman world. This military defeat in 410 AD also had consequences beyond the immediate loss of Rome. It highlighted the empire's inability to respond effectively to external threats. The Roman military, once the most formidable fighting force in the world, became increasingly ineffective. As more and more barbarian groups advanced into Roman territory, the empire struggled to maintain its borders. Within weeks, refugees flooded North Africa. The imperial court, already relocated to Ravenna, stopped pretending Rome mattered politically. And across the empire, local strongmen started making their own deals with barbarian armies, because Rome clearly couldn't protect anyone anymore. In the years following the sack of Rome, the Western Roman Empire would continue to decline. The loss of territory, combined with internal strife, rendered the empire increasingly fragmented. By 476 AD, we would see the deposition of the last Roman emperor in the West, Romulus Augustulus. The fall of Rome was not just a single event. It was a series of interrelated crises that unraveled a once mighty empire. And here's the critical point. The military collapse was symptomatic of deeper issues. The Roman economy had already been weakened by the events of 301 AD, and social cohesion was eroding. What can history teach us today about the fragility of societies? As we move into the next critical date, 529 AD, we must consider not just the fall of the military might, but the cultural implications of this decline. By 529 AD, the cultural landscape of the Roman Empire had changed dramatically. This year is marked by the closure of the Platonic Academy in Athens, an event that many historians view as a significant turning point in the intellectual life of the empire. The decision to close the academy was not merely an administrative act, It represented a broader cultural shift. Emperor Justinian, who ruled from 527 to 565 AD, sought to reclaim the glory of Rome through a series of reforms. He aimed to unify and strengthen the empire, but faced immense challenges. The closure of the Platonic Academy symbolized the end of classical philosophy and the Hellenistic tradition that had flourished for centuries. The Academy in Athens had been teaching Plato for 900 years. Beat. When Justinian shut it down, the last professors fled to Persia. Meanwhile, literacy rates dropped so fast that within 2 generations, most people in the former Western Empire couldn't read the inscriptions on their own buildings. The once vibrant intellectual climate was being replaced by a more dogmatic and less critical approach to learning. The cultural heritage that had defined Rome was being lost. This cultural demise had far-reaching consequences. The decline of classical education meant that fewer individuals were equipped to participate in the governance and administration of the empire. As the quality of leadership waned, so did the effectiveness of the imperial government. The bureaucratic machinery of Rome, which had once been a marvel of organization, began to falter. Let's draw a parallel to today. The decline of cultural institutions and education can mirror the challenges faced by modern societies. The preservation of knowledge and critical thought is essential for the functioning of any state. What happens when cultural institutions fail? Societies risk losing their intellectual foundations, making them more vulnerable to external pressures. The closure of the Platonic Academy was not just about one institution, it marked the end of an era. It represented a shift away from the values that had once guided Roman civilization. The legacy of Rome was fading, and with it, the ideals of democracy, philosophy, and civic engagement. As we consider the implications of these 3 dates, 301 AD, 410 AD, and 529 AD, we see a pattern emerging. Each date represents a different angle of decline: economic, military, and cultural. The end of Rome was not a singular event, but a complex process of transformation that unfolded over centuries. Now, as we draw closer to our conclusion, we must ask ourselves, which of these dates truly signifies the end of Rome? So which date marks the real end? Beat 301, when the economy broke; 410, when the myth of Roman invincibility shattered; or 529, when the last lights of classical learning went dark. The answer depends on what you think Rome actually was. Each date encapsulates a vital aspect of why the Roman Empire fell apart. 301 AD reveals the fragility of economic systems. 410 AD exposes the vulnerabilities of military power. 529 AD illustrates the loss of cultural identity and intellectual rigor. So which date represents the true end of Rome? The answer is layered and complex. Each date contributes to an understanding of the decline. The empire didn't fall overnight. It eroded gradually, with each crisis compounding the effects of the previous one. In many ways, this historical narrative resonates today. Societies face economic challenges, military engagements, and cultural shifts that test their resilience. The lessons of Rome remind us that every collapse has a story. Let's investigate how these stories connect to our modern world. If you found this exploration of the end of Rome intriguing, don't forget to subscribe to Empire Unraveled for more historical insights. Together, we'll unravel the complexities of our past to better understand our present and future. Join us on this journey through history. It's a story worth telling,